Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to episode 20 of Music is Everything. This is the podcast where I take a musical idea, concept, opinion, fact, belief, talk about it at length, and connect it to other things in the world. As always, thank you for subscribing and for clicking and sharing and all of that stuff. If you are one of my Patreon patrons, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the support. And just to kind of go over what I have said in the last two podcasts for Music is Not a Genre, the big news is I'm transferring all of these podcasts to audio only. I'll still be on YouTube and Patreon via videos where you can see me. But if you just want to hear me, if you're in the car, subway, walking, a place where you don't want to be watching something, you'd rather be listening, these will all be now available on Spotify and on several other podcast streaming services. And I'll continue to update you on that. This week, it's a topic I'm very passionate about, as usual. And it's also wraps up the season, I guess you could say, for these podcasts. Next week, we'll be starting a brand new season with some brand new ideas, including an interview series where I talk with other musicians and creators and people in the music world. And that will only be available on my Patreon site. So if you're a member, lucky you. And if not, please consider it. I think you will like it. It's not much per month, and you're getting a whole lot. And as always, I appreciate it. So let's get to this week's topic. Vice versus the destructive and bogus origins of music rivalries. People are passionate about the music they love. Most people, anyway. We won't mention the others. When that passion runs so deep that it becomes part of their core identity, it can cause fires. They can get insulted by people who don't like a favorite artist or style. They can get so obsessed with their music that all other music is ignored or deemed unworthy, and that stance spreads to the other music lovers. They can let that feeling run so rampant that it goes from apathy to disdain to outright hatred. I felt all of that. I'm a passionate music obsessive, as if you didn't know. I used to be so protective of my tastes that I'd be afraid to share them. So disdainful of others who disagreed that I could barely discuss music with anyone ever. Someone who loves music as much as I do, and I couldn't talk about it. I'd cling tightly to my opinions and keep them to myself, or share them only within a like-minded echo chamber. Key phrase there. It's easy to explain and understand the internal reasons why we can get this way. It's what we're exposed to as kids and young adults. It makes us feel what we want to. It reflects ourselves back to ourselves in the light we want to see. It gives us a safe space to hide our vulnerabilities from the perceived dangers of the unknown. And it's important to note that somewhere in our being, consciously or not, we choose to embrace these exclusionary attitudes. What often gets overlooked are the external reasons. Social pressure to belong to a certain group or demographic, industry messages that favor one artist or type of music over another and target those messages only to certain people. Media sensationalism that shirks factual reporting to focus solely on controversy, even when that controversy is completely made up. Critics and journalists whose bias shines through their words more strongly than any attempt at objective analysis. We're not always aware of these pressures and influences, but they are always there, imposing restrictions on the otherwise boundless world of music appreciation. Think of all the music rivalries. Here are some examples. Beatles versus Stones, Michael Jackson versus Prince, Nirvana versus Pearl Jam, Mariah versus Whitney, Tupac versus Biggie, metal versus punk, rock versus disco or hip-hop. All of these were either completely untrue or only true because either fans let their passions divide them or one of those external influencers hyped up differences to stir up press and money. In some cases, like rock versus disco, it stemmed not just from the mercenary pursuit of dollars and power, but also from flat-out racism, which shows that even fake rivalries can get ugly, even dangerous. we have a choice, one that allows us to hold on to what we believe and still be open to others' tastes and beliefs and opinions and experiences. Maybe even open to appreciating something they do, something we never thought we'd understand. When I was a kid, I never understood why people couldn't like both rock and disco, but I kept it to myself. And that started me down the road of developing that exclusive, divisive mindset. External pressures and internal fear caused me to separate myself from too many people. That adopted, learned, nourished mindset took hold and prevented me from sharing the joy of the music I love. It compelled me to judge others so harshly that I dismissed both them and their music as a defense against the possibility that they might do the same to me. Then I made a conscious choice to grow out of all that, to open up and be vulnerable so I could be more connected, more informed, and ultimately happier and stronger. It took time and overcoming fear and mistrust, but I kept at it because I wanted people to know what I love and to feel their love even if it didn't match. Because it has to go both ways. For someone else to respect my musical tastes, or even more crucially, my actual original music, I need to first extend that respect. I don't have to like what they like, and vice versa. I can seriously not get why they are into some band or style, and vice versa. And I can be okay with all of that, and vice versa. Apply any of this to the world at large, to political, social, sexual, religious beliefs and opinions. See how we are deliberately being manipulated and divided so we can't all work together to seize power from those doing the dividing. See how we can consciously choose to open ourselves to others' experiences while still holding on to our own, and how that doesn't threaten our well-being. It strengthens it. We can all be respected and heard and develop true conversation, true connection, and true and lasting change. Pause for silence. You see how prejudiced opinions can start anywhere. They can, and this is kind of one of the points I say. It's not just in the music world that this applies, but the way you approach one thing very much influences the way you approach something else. You know, if you conquer some issue you have in one realm that crosses over into other realms, you might have to adjust it and learn it again in a different way, but it works. You know, it does do that thing. If you hold on to prejudices and biases and more than that, just a way of thinking about the world, a kind of an us and them way of thinking, or the only way you can feel safe about what you feel and believe strongly is if you push away and disrespect things that people feel and believe strongly that don't agree with yours, you know, and it's a sad state of affairs, as we know. It's been going on for God knows how many hundreds and thousands of years, but especially in recent years, when all of that has been stirred up, you know, and it's been stirred up by, unfortunately, and as almost as always, by trumped up bullshit. And yes, I use that word deliberately. I think it's fucking amazing that our president's last name is the equivalent of, honestly, bullshit. You know, when something is trumped up, it's made into more than it is, or made into something that it isn't, right? Which is pretty much what happened with him. And yes, I'm willing to discuss that with anybody who would like to. But the you know, point being there is that people's passions are being fed by falsities. People's passions are being fed not just by falsities, but by genuine differences too. And what I mean by that is they're taking certain very small things that are true, attaching them to and blowing them up with things that are completely untrue, and causing people to latch on to those big, fake, false, you know, balloon things that create a sense of otherness and division and fear and you know, which leads to anger and rage and violence and things like that. You know, you have to ask yourself why this is being done. And yes, like I said, a lot of it comes from the inside. A lot of it comes from us, somewhere consciously or not, making the decision to be so self-protective and self-interested and self-involved that we can't come out of that and figure out a way to appreciate others, whether we agree with them or not. And believe me, nobody's saying you have to agree with someone that you completely disagree with, whether in word or action. You know, uh, the job isn't easy, you know, and I talked about me going through it in there because I understand how difficult it is to come out of that so-called safe zone. Because first of all, it's not a safe zone. It's a cloistered zone. It's a very, you know, closed off zone. It's a zone where if you are that selfish and self-involved, you really don't have to worry that, you know, that much about others' opinions because you're completely taking care of yourself, which of course closes you off, you know, from pretty much all the good stuff in life too, or at least feeling it genuinely. You know, when you're stuck in a place where you're not allowing yourself to feel or think about a bunch of things, it doesn't just close off the things you choose to close off. It closes off a whole bunch of other things. And if we can take something as simple as seemingly innocuous as music and use that as an example of how to change our mindset and our approach to things and our way of kind of thinking about things that are, and people that are, who are different from us. But we do that in music and say, well, I'm just going to expand my knowledge of music when it comes to, I don't know, pop country music. It's not one of my favorites. I'm going to listen a little bit more of that. So I dove into like Leanne Rimes recently for the specific reason, and a couple of other, you know, Dolly Parton, who I'm sorry, you got to respect her no matter who she is or what she does because of just her amazing songwriting ability and her voice. But the point being, these are not necessarily my core styles of music. I open myself up to them to appreciate and understand them, but still hold on to the styles, you know, of music that I appreciate and love even more, you know. And that's a music example. You know, so say you're out in the world and you are watching the news, you know, whether it's the, whatever, you know, whatever, wherever you get your news from, and you are compelled to believe or feel or think about another person or group of people or ideology or movement in a certain way, give that some thought. Question if you are being fed things that you're just swallowing and spitting back out, or do you genuinely believe what other people are saying about this, or are you compelled to believe it because it's being attached to things like fear, things like it will harm you, or they will harm you, or they will take something away from you, or that ideology will cheat you out of something. I can tell you that almost 100% of the time, if that is the information that you're being fed, it's not true. Go just a little bit down that road. Open yourself up to that vulnerability because, you know, as so many wise people have said, vulnerability, to be vulnerable is to be strong. Because if you feel courageous enough to allow yourself to be vulnerable, that shows tremendous strength. And you can only get stronger from doing that. There is a way to maintain your own boundary and your own sense of protection while still being open and connected to the world. Even open and connected to friends and relatives or colleagues and coworkers that you just don't agree with on some very fundamental things. I'm not somebody who's going to be, like most of you, I imagine, who's going to be swayed, opinion-wise, by someone else's opinion if I decide to open up to them and try to connect to them. That's not going to all of a sudden be like, oh, am I, you know, quote-unquote consorting with the enemy? That's not how it is. Everybody has differences, even the person you are closest to. There are things you don't agree with. They just don't happen, you know, probably aren't things that are so core that they're divisive to you. But the point being, even the things that are core don't have to be divisive. And in fact, everybody is going to benefit from finding ways to be connected and not divisive. And you know I talk about this all the time in relation to the music world and in relation to the world at large. And that really is the biggest point here, is the point of almost every one of my podcasts, which is which is that division kills, division suffocates, division harms, injures, division takes away. So think, in fact, this is a great thing to do. Think of anything you believe, any ideology you hold, or anything that has been given to you as a fact but colored in a certain way. Think of any opinion, anything like that, any tenet, just like that word. And if the sense you get from that is division, is separation, is being boxed in, is enhancing and enlarging and blowing up and trumping up the differences between you and the other person, or your ideology and another group's or person's ideology. If what you're feeling is a sense of separation, disconnection, division, and that comes from, I think, two things. One, fear of connecting, of loss of self because you connect to something that's not of you, and just flat out untruth, because the vast majority of things, beliefs, whatever in the world that create that sense of division and separation are not true. Connection is honestly the only fundamental truth that imbues everything in the world and beyond. So thank you for listening to episode 20. I hope you follow me into season 3. Thank you for being a Patreon patron. You are helping me and all the things I do and my family and all of that stuff. And so, like I said, there will be more to come. As always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. I'll see you next time.